This world is beautiful, and when we talk about really engaging with it, it's a matter of service, and just showing up is an act of service. Just doing something um, what I feel like we forget is that being yourself is an act of service. Really, really leaning into it, like facing the discomfort. If you have resentments, discussing the resentments, that's engaging with maybe where you're at. And I don't know who I'm speaking to. I don't know who's listening. I'm trying to reach in all the way to the bottom, where I was, which was, just totally alone and totally um, just a walking ball of just intense suppressed energy, right? And we just have to open a door. And what I'll say is that it really helps. It really helps to make connection to something greater. And I guarantee there is something out there, and I don't know what that is for you. It's a personal experience, but making room for a prayer of the heart every day is enough to get this ball started. And whether you end up in my community or not is no different to me, because what we're trying to do is create a movement, is to start something where this spark spreads all over the world, because that's the only thing we can do here. Is like, we're here, and while we're here, I'm going to do something to beautify this place.
Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers. James and Justin back again, and today we have another special guest for you. We've got Tyler, host of the Complex YouTube channel, a channel exploring transformative solutions for our modern day trauma complexes. There's also kind of like a spirituality thing going on there, and also some focus on the divine masculine and feminine in the content. So should be a good conversation.
Modern day trauma complexes. That sounds interesting to get into. Just from what I've checked out so far, he seems like he talks about spiritual topics many of you have heard before, but he kind of approaches it from a grounded point of view, sort of like a everyman type of take on it.
All right, well, we won't keep you guys waiting. Let's get into it. All right, Tyler, thank you so much for being on the show, host of the Complex YouTube channel. Before we get into the channels and the specifics of the topics that you kind of touched there, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you are now as host of this new YouTube channel.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I'm sure there's going to be a really fun conversation. I'm looking forward to it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big question, and I think for me, I was raised in a Western culture, just like everyone else here. Maybe some of your audience, but it seems like the name of the game for this culture is to be anything but what you are in order to be safe. And so as being raised in a family that was very obsessed with imagery, like appearing as though we're successful. I grew up in this culture, and my parents did the best they could. They were raised by theirs, so it's no slight on them. They were raised by a culture that was very much needed to appear, like I said, successful. So what we did is a culture, we would ignore elephants in the room, right? Like, let's not ignore this big looming dark feeling or sensation or incongruency or inauthenticity, and let's just move toward the appearance. And that was just the name of the game for me. On top of that, I had a biological father that wasn't in the picture. And there was fatherlessness for generations before me. Even my adopted father, I was adopted by a good man, right? But we're very different biologically. He had fatherlessness, was adopted by someone else as well. My mother had like 3 generations of fatherlessness. And then even my biological father, who wasn't around, had fatherlessness for like several generations. So that was a big theme for me, something that has really catalyzed me into the work I do now. But so I had just a lot of difficulty, and I had this intuition or this instinct to really challenge or call out the elephant in the room. So I was very much a black sheep in the family, and I created so much seeming disharmony in my efforts to get back to what I would call authenticity. And it was very subtle. It was like a part of my spirit. It was a part of this inner desire to like feel connected, feel a part of, right? And so inevitably, in that disharmony, In my teens, I found drugs. They were the solution for me for a long time. I made it impossible for me to continue to live in my family's house. So I got kicked out very young. Was on the streets for a while. I was homeless for a long time. I was doing hard stuff too. It was very difficult for me. And so that led me to, it was interesting because there was a few experiences that reached out to me that kind of found me during those times. There was one such experience in the midst of like a really dark time for me. It was one of the hardest times in my life. It was like I was on the brink of homelessness. I had made it impossible for my family to continue helping me, and they'd spent a lot of money trying to help me, right? And I hit this point where it was like hell on earth for me. I was just in this state of mind that was so just unbearably difficult. Just this, just what I would describe it as this feeling of just complete not good enoughness. Like I had failed. I had sinned against reality. It was just so like just palpable in my being. And at that time, there was this, I don't know how it describe, it was very numinous, this experience. But several books found me. And in my surrender, because I was so desperate, I started reading. There was several books. There's this book called Wherever You Go, There You Are by John John Kabat-Zinn. I think it's a mindfulness meditation book. And another book called A Course in Miracles. And I would read them and I didn't understand anything that it was saying, but something inside of me just kept like, it was like letting me know, hey, this is the answer. There's something in here that's special. And I remember in the mindfulness book, it talked about this idea of presence, right? This idea of being still and present. And for a moment in my hell, I just really tried looking at the wall for a moment and just focused on seeing the wall in stillness. And for a moment, just for this brief moment, everything was okay. Like there was nothing wrong. And I realized that there's this huge contrast between the activity in my mind and this other reality that is without thought. And so that began this like journey for me during that time where I started meditating a lot, right? I started meditating. And this is gonna be a long story. I hope that's okay. But I started meditating and eventually like I managed to pull away from the drugs on my own. It was this peculiar time because yeah, anyways, I'll so meditating and I went like 9 months and I did this raw food diet. I did all these things and I just stayed disciplined because I was so desperate, right? I was like, okay, I'm not going back to that place. And there was this one such meditation where I was getting really good at it, and I was in this state of mind where I was able to put myself in a trance, in a deep trance, and in this trance state, I experienced like almost like a dissolving of the body, almost like I lost kind of the boundary between me and everything else, and I kind of fell into this state of like what people would call the infinite particle. And it was hyper. I was hyper aware, and I remember in the experience there was thoughtlessness, but if I were to put a thought to it, it would have been like, oh, this is everything. This is what everyone's seeking, right? This state of peace. And and then this is the really weird part. I suddenly had this experience, and it was like if I were to put imagery to it, it was like I was falling out of a theater. And and the screen of my life was like on the theater screen, and I fell out of it. And then I suddenly had this hyper real, hyper physical experience of waking up. And the way I describe it is in the same way you wake up from a dream here on earth, the contrast between the reality of that place in the dream and this place, the difference in reality, right? It's like, oh my God, oh yeah, of course that was just a dream. When just a moment ago I was in the dream and it felt like all there was to reality, right? It was like, oh yeah, this is all there is. Suddenly I'm waking up and, for real, and I'm in the world and I'm like, oh, that was just a dream because of how much more real this place is. That same thing happened to me. but it was on a higher plane. And I don't know how else to describe it, but it was like suddenly I was becoming hyper aware, hyper awake, more awake than I've ever been to this reality that was in the moment the answer to everything. It was like everything I yearned for, everything my body, my soul, everything's the need to belong, the sense of oneness, this I feel like this condition of being alive here on planet Earth, right? It's like everything was satiated. It was, and I was suddenly liberated from all the hardware of the body. It was like I didn't need to have to process things in my brain anymore, the limits of the hardware of the brain. And there was this sense of expansive knowing that just transcended reality. I mean, there's no words to describe it. Even now, as I try to remember it, it's like I'm having to remember it through the hardware of the brain, and I can't really even do it. It just is, I'm so limited. And in that place, I remember just it was like this huge breath of this sigh of relief, like, oh, oh, this is all there's ever been. And and it was like waking up from a dream. And my life on earth was the dream. And and it just it confirmed it just it made that brief moment, because I was there for a moment. And I could describe like physically, I remember looking down. I remember like people, they'll often say like, oh, an out of body experience, or there's this idea, this preconceived idea that this experience of having an out of body experience, or maybe having like an awakening or something, is going into a spiritual realm, which implies it's almost really smoky and kind of like ethereal. In my experience, it was more physical, like hyper physical, hyper real, much more real, much more tangible, like like times 100. It was wild. And in that state, I remember looking down at what I would imagine were like a feet or something, but it was very different. I mean, it's really hard to describe. There was colors, and like behind the feet, it was like a meadow. It's very much like exactly what you would describe as heaven, right? It was just very much that way. And and then for a moment I thought to myself, "Oh, what about the friends and family that I left behind?" Right? And as soon as I thought that, I snapped right back into my body. I just went like just this condensed, like this condensing feeling of shrinking down, and just warp, and just went right back into my body, and I jolted awake. And I was shocked, and I had no idea how to. I wrote it down in a journal. I had no idea how to talk about it, and I kept that hidden for 10 years. And I didn't talk about it. I had no idea how to talk about it. And I was so, anytime I would try to share it, this really vulnerable part of me would open up, almost like the energy of my being, the thing that we cover ourselves with here in this world, was exposed. And like it would be so nerve-wracking for me that I felt so vulnerable, like I would be rejected, I'd be judged. So I just kept that part of myself hidden for so long. But meanwhile, in the background, I was always chasing it. And so there was this like rift created by that experience. Cause even after that, right, I fell back into addiction for years. It took me so long to get out of it, even though that was what I would call like a very spiritual experience or an awakening experience. It really didn't solve everything for me. Even it was, to me, it became this thing that I compared everything to, you know?
Mm.
And so it really created so much disharmony for me in my life. And like I was just struggling trying to contextualize it and make sense of it. And I had these two contrasting realities that were just so polarized. And so I, for many years I remained an addict, and then I ended up getting sober after at the end of a really, hard run. And I went through a 12-step program and stone cold sober for 10 years. And then I started pursuing after that, like I went down another kind of rabbit hole. I started pursuing psychedelics, and that was the closest I've ever come to actually recreating that experience. But even psychedelics became their own trap, right? And what I've learned is that this seeking and this like this seeking thing we do, it can create such a disharmony inside of our bodies. And what I'm really learning, and this is the main thing that my work is around spirituality, is that this is it. This is what we get to be here, right? Like we get to do this. And if we're using these spiritual ideas to kind of escape this place, we're actually not being spiritual, because this place is just as spiritual. Even though from this context I've had, it is very dreamlike. But there's this reality here that we have to contend with, and it can be a very beautiful experience through the challenge that it brings. And so, for me, a few years ago, after some of these, numinous psychedelic experiences, and then having to integrate the lessons from that form of escapism, I met a good friend of mine, and then my wife, now wife, and and we started a men's group, and the men's group was based on this idea of integrating and becoming just effective beings while we're having this third world 3D experience, right? This 3D experience of being in the body. And so our work really has been to honor the beautiful esoteric ideas, but also to ground them in a reality that actually is effective and actually doesn't result in this form of escapism or separation from a realm that is just as, it's like the idea of non-duality, this idea of like, that nothing's separate, right? That includes everything here. That includes everything that's dual. That includes everything that's separate too. And so there's, I'm getting a little esoteric here, but that's the basis of my work, right? And so we've created a men's group where we can lean into becoming as authentic as we can, right? Exculpating and unearthing these energies that we resist inside of ourselves, the things that we put over the top of those energies, like this intention, like this desire to become more spiritual, is sometimes just this form of denying the human realm, the humanity within us. And I've just seen it so much. I've seen it, I did a recent, critique on one of the Aubrey Marcus podcasts. He had talked about this idea of like, this sacred three-way thing he was doing. And
I saw that your video on polyamory or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And I really, I respect Aubrey. He's done amazing things. I just relate with him because I understand what it's like to chase this pleasure, right? This loftiness. And what I found is that where the treasure lies is in the shadow, in the places we don't want to look. And so, it's that place that I have to learn to integrate, which was like at the time I had that numinous spiritual experience, was when I just finally faced the discomfort with my reality, right? Like I started to walk this path of like facing the shadow, because true wholeness includes the whole spectrum. You can't get to the light by denying the shadow. You can
It's almost like messy but necessary or something.
That's it, man.
That's how I resonate with what you're saying. By the way, very poignant and succinct. Like you've got away with words. That was good. But what you said there, there's gold in the shadow and stuff like that. Like that's messy work. That Jungian shadow work sometimes, because it can get confusing when you're integrating stuff that like you probably can't even share with everybody. It's bizarre, and it seems in a way, I know non-duality is non-duality, but there's seeming distinctions everywhere. And sometimes that maybe you can just bounce off this, or maybe I'm interrupting too much.
No.
No.
Well, I'm asking him, but I'm saying like, I'll just quickly say this and then you can continue, I guess. But sometimes seems like there's a distinction between awareness, the kind of awareness that makes you realize a deeper reality, like you realize you were dreaming a moment ago or something. That kind of raw backdrop awareness or underappreciated awareness below or inside everything or part of everything, versus ego development, like regular old And when I say development, I don't mean like it's developing somewhere specific or it's going somewhere good. I just mean progression of the movement of the ego. There
Yeah,
seems to be a distinction. Do you know what I mean by this?
I totally get what you're saying, and it's such, it's such a difficult topic because there's so many great sages, great masters out there whom I respect tremendously. These guys that speak on behalf of like transcending the ego, right?
Uh huh.
This idea of like transcending the ego, right? That becomes the basis for a lot of this escapist behavior. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
have this mentor that I work with, and I do need to give a shout out to him. He's got a blog that he writes called jaguarmarigold.com, and he writes amazing work. And it is very much like you're saying, like this depth psychology, psycho spiritual idea. Like, and what he talks about is like developing what he calls the dominant ego personality, this aspect of ourselves that is, it's like the interface between the all and the world. And that's a necessary part of ourselves. And I think that in many ways, like it's a semantics thing. Like when we talk about the ego and transcending the ego, I agree. I think with the felt sense of that word, which is like we're talking about transcending the complexes or these maladaptive survival strategies that aren't serving us well, that block our awareness of our unity with things, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that are limiting. And
It's
so
like thought addiction and stuff like that.
totally. And I still that's that's a challenge of mine, right? I
Me
still
too.
yeah. So
Glad we can be honest with each other.
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and like I said, like I just really want to pay tribute to all the great sages and teachers out there. A lot of the things I'm gonna say are probably they sound, paradoxical or, against some of these things, but it's not, it's one of those paradoxes where like depending on our particular um makeup, certain ideas are going to be useful for us at certain times, and they may seem completely diametrically opposed to one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the nature of this, um, polarity experience that we're having here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The shadow's a difficult one because it's like trying to get someone who hasn't worked out in a long, long time to start working out for the first time. It sucks.
Oh
It
yeah,
sucks. So,
yeah.
what do you recommend? What are some of the tools and tips that you use to help like guys within maybe your men's group or even on your podcast
Yeah.
to start facing some of this?
I'm so glad you asked that because there's this ego drive in me to say, here, I have the answers. The reality is that we evolved in tribes, right? We need community. The nature of relating healthy to a community almost does it automatically. The problem is, and what my mentor says, is that most of us are staring at screens and they're not staring back at us. We're dissociated from each other. And so the practice of like laying ourselves bare in front of other people is such a healthy practice. And it's that whenever you're working on this shadow work, it's a friend of mine and we speak about, it's like going down a chimney together. Everybody gets soot on their face, everybody gets dirty, and you have to be willing to just carry it through to the end, like wait for the miracle, because there's beauty in that. Now the problem is that most of us have no tolerance for discomfort. We haven't built what I like to call, like, we haven't built a boat big enough to man the waves, and it's an emotional handicap that most of us have. And so we're not operating with our full instincts online. A lot of the trauma that occurs to us, it happens in childhood, and there's this safety mechanism. There's this book I recommend called Trauma and the Soul. It's really great. He talks about this separation that occurs, this safety mechanism that comes in and carries the what I'd call the innocent child, the little ball of authenticity, right? It carries it aside so that it's safe when this trauma occurs to us as a child. And trauma can be many things. I mean, a lot of us have this idealized, like, oh, sexual rape or anything. No, it can be many things, right? As an example, like our ability to be angry, which is this sacred boundary setting ability that we're born with, right? Like it's inherent in us. It's what allows us to stay connected to the tribe. It protects our reputation. It's the thing that says, no, you're not going to destroy this part of me. I'm going to keep what's sacred alive. I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to protect my reputation, lest I be exiled from the tribe. But when we're a child, these things will happen. Like a mother or father will where we get angry, and the mother and father, like in their dissociated, difficult selves, they say, don't you dare yell at me, or I'll spank you, or I will or you'll go to your room, which to the child is abandonment. That
Yeah,
is
go be
experienced
by
as abandonment.
yourself with your feelings.
Right, right. And
Then all they
it's
can do
like
is cry and pound on the door.
and it's experienced as exile from the
Mm.
community, which is the last thing that can happen to a human who's evolved in a tribe. If that happens, they die. So what happens is the protective device is like, we can't let that happen. So it separates that part of ourselves out here. And that energy doesn't just go away. It transforms it into something ugly and unconscious. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the shadow. So when we go into this shadow together, we have to create scenarios. Like, this is something that my men's group and I do, is that we'll try to create scenarios which evokes those parts of ourselves, and it's ugly and difficult, and it's necessary. It's a
I
hundred
love
percent
it.
fucking necessary,
I love it. I love that you got some guys that you can be like that with, you
Yeah.
know? The one I have to say this, a distinction that you made when you were explaining that, and you said, being part of a tribe kind of helps you do this shadow stuff automatically. And a distinction that stood out to me is when you lay yourself bare.
Yes.
You can be among people and totally fake, and you ain't gonna learn you might learn some sort of superficial stuff. But I think the jewels start to exist when you and there's no way to cultivate bravery. You just are brave when you do something brave. That's how it works.
That's
You can't
thousand
work
percent.
yourself up to being brave. You do it, and then you're brave.
Right, right.
And so
It's
you go down the water slide and you start telling the truth for the first time. And you're damn right. You will see who abandons you. You will see what you lose. You will see what gets sloughed off and falls off, and the way
mm,
the world reacts to you and how keen they are. The weird somebody that's been asleep for 20 years will have enough focus to cut you right to the core,
mm.
possessed by the demon of cutting you to the coreness.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Then it gets mystical and weird, and
it
I don't
does.
even know what truth is. I'm trying to get away from, because I've harped about honesty for so long on this. But what I was trying to get at back then was, it's just a quicker way. Like, you could take the slow route and keep hauling your ass to retreat after retreat, but if you start telling the truth, it'll
Mm,
become so painfully obvious, all the conditional love that's out there, and all the
mm,
conditional this, and how conditioned you are.
mhm.
Just do it. Just take the plunge, and then you'll learn. And guess what? It's gonna cost you. It's gonna cost some shit.
Yeah, I love that. You're so right, man. You're right on the money. That's beautifully said. What came to mind when you were saying that, I made this video about unconditional love and how it's not guaranteed. And there's this, like, uh, I read before, with trivial truths, the opposite is false. With great truths, the opposite is also true. And so when it comes to something like love, I think of it in terms of like masculine, feminine energy. Feminine love is completely unconditional. It's given to you for free. There's like it's granted. It's guaranteed, and it's beautiful for that reason. And then there's masculine love, which must be earned, and therefore could be argued is more valuable. It's like, I have to earn my place at the round table, right? Both of those things have to be present because they represent the whole spectrum, this yin and yang
Mm.
experience
Hmm.
that we're going through, right? And I think what we tend to do, especially when we have these complexes or this cultural distortions, is we move to one or the other. We don't integrate both. And that's the true, what I feel, spiritual path is walking this tightrope and expanding to include both sides of every great truth out there, which is the nature. It's like the nature of this experience is it's a polarized experience. And that doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong, although that is the nature of polarity. It's like that, the true versus false and all that stuff. Well, it's like the divine dichotomy being God is what he is, and God also is what he isn't.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
this,
yeah.
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 I have this thing I've been saying, and maybe you could. It hasn't gotten outstanding feedback, but every now and then I have terms that come to my mind, and one is that okay, in the Bible, Satan is the father of lies, but like he tells Eve the kind of the truth, and Yahweh is the one that's sort of like, you're not gonna die, like. And then I said, I parodied the father of lies is logic. I said, Satan represents logic oftentimes. He's always convincing or trying to point out
Mm.
something. And God, which it's not really like this, which is what's probably so not resonatable about it, is like represents maybe kind of like, don't you see all the stuff happening for you pro bono? The birds are chirping for you, the sun's all this
Uh,
shit is happening for you, like Osho would describe it.
uh-huh.
And then, but you need logic. Try living without logic. Try living without Satan. It's
I
both necessary,
I do hear you.
and we walk that line as human beings.
I do hear you there. Yeah, it's such a I love that exploration. I love the willingness because that's exactly what we need is just need like authentic exploration. And there's people out there that would argue, well, that's like, eating from the knowledge of good and evil sort of thing. It can be obviously dangerous. And there is
Yeah.
like, I guess, in many ways, because we're talking about it, there's this like sacred forgetting too that can be incorporated into some of this too. It's like,
Mm.
like I remember like,
Sacred forgetting. That
yeah,
sounds like something
like
you'd be interested in. Yeah.
I just invented that term, but like when I refer to like the Course in Miracles, what it talks about is this principle of forgiveness, right? It's this idea, like the basic metaphysical principles of A Course in Miracles is that we are all at home in heaven dreaming of exile. And that kind of goes in line with my experience too. But it's this idea that we're this extension of God, one with Him. There's no separation, no difference, essentially. Well, difference only being that He created us, not the other way around. But that we're just in this ocean of oneness with Him. There's no distinctions, and that in that place we took this tiny mad idea in which we forgot to laugh. Like maybe I could be separate, and in so doing, fell asleep to what is and birthed what seemingly could be separate, which would be the opposite of love, which is fear. But the opposite of love, what the opposite of what is all encompassing cannot really exist. So there's this like, now this polarity exists, this true versus false. And now there's this yin and yang, right? And so now we're in this position where we're overwhelmed with the fear of what we've done with reality, which aligns with some of this deeper stuff that I was experiencing at the time. I was having this like really difficult period of my life. And so it's like we're looking upon what we did, what we felt we did, which is just fall asleep to reality. And we see that we created a reality that's seemingly apart from God's will or what was created. And in so doing, it birthed the fear and guilt idea. Like, holy shit, I fucked up. I sinned against reality. I created something apart from the will of my father. And in that overwhelming fear and guilt, which is like synonymous with death, it's so overwhelming that we couldn't manage to do that. So we chose to first forget that we did that and then birth the world outside of ourselves upon which we can blame. And so the whole principle of the Course in Miracles is that the pathway home is to forgive what never really occurred, right? So it's this idea of releasing and letting go of all of our hooks in reality upon which we depend so that we can blame and keep this experience real. Like it's almost like in order to continue to exculpate and get rid of the guilt that we have inside of ourselves, we have to have this, we have to hold on to it first off, and then cast it upon what seems to be exterior, which isn't really there. It's this world of separation that was birthed out of this tiny mad idea that we took seriously. And so I often think like, yeah, just this, and that is the polarity. It's just one model, right? It's one model of many for which we can kind of justify forgiveness, right? Justify the path home, which I appreciate. But as with anything, you get too stuck on it, it can become its own version of escapism, which it has been for me, right? These ideas are sometimes dangerous for the complex or the separated self, the part of ourselves that um, is the opposite end of the spectrum. I don't know. I kind of went off on a
Yeah.
tangent.
Sacred forgetting. Can you get a little more
Yes.
precise about
Yeah.
exactly what
So,
that means?
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's where I went off kilter there. So this idea of forgiveness is the willingness to, because our logic mind, right, is it's very powerful. It's a dissociative device. It's meant to like
Mm-hmm.
it's meant to channel the energies of our evolution, our instincts, the seven basic emotions in and translate them and dissociate them into a complex world so that you're interfacing correctly with a complex world with a high level of culture. And so when you think about this idea, like the idea of forgiveness, what happens is this logical mind can become such a fortress of stuckness, right? Where we can't help but see what we've made of the world. And so there's this sacred practice of being willing to forget what you've made of it so that something new can come in and take its place, which may be preferred, right? And so I think about that when I went through my addiction, because, at the time I was very convinced that what I was seeing was real. And that was my logical mind being the master, right? And you could
Mm-hmm.
argue with, if using the lens of Christianity here, that that was like a Satan type of energy that was coming through.
The accuser, Satan's described as the accuser. You're accusing yourself over and over again
Oh
and
yeah, and everyone
rehashing
else in my
guilt
life.
and feeling real solid as an ego.
That's right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so then I was going through this process of like I saw everything else to blame for my condition, right? And I had to be willing to like make room for that to be dissolved. And so that's the sacred forgetting that I'm talking about. There is a
Okay. We
yeah.
were talking about it. We were all up at the family property, and there was kind of a rift between us because there were people talking about, big part of our family is Christian, and so we speak a lot of Christianese when we all get together.
Hmm.
And we were talking about a verse that talks about God saying forgiveness and forgetting, that those go together. And some people were saying, well, I can forgive, but I don't forget, and all this. And people were saying stuff like, well, what if there's a way of forgetting, what if you can get to a point where you can forget? And it didn't seem quite right to me, because I found so much value in being able to hold all that stuff that once tormented me as guilt, like sitting in it and being like, because there's so much room for bypassing there too. And like, well, I'm past that and I've forgotten it and all that stuff. It's like, I want to integrate this fully and have nothing, for the ride or die people around me, because I believe your life is enriched the more people you can be surround that you can be honest with. It's like, let me tell you some of the horrors that exist within my mind and some of the horrors I've even done and all of this kind of stuff. It's not. It'd be foolish to just spread that out to everybody. But for
I
people
was
that are
kind
close
of,
to you,
yeah, I was kind of taking the side of, I thought I was just kind of throwing out maybe the possibility that maybe you could still integrate the lesson of the terrible thing that happened to you while at the same time possibly forgetting it.
well,
Yeah, and
the point I'm trying to make here is that if it's relegated to the shadow realm, meaning it's playing out in your conscious life, but you're behaving unconsciously. You're looking at your life, you're dissatisfied. You're like, why are things playing out this way for me? Why? Or you find yourself judging too harshly others. You find yourself dissatisfied, unwhole. I believe it can be effective to actually think those things over. Now, once those things have been settled and accepted within you, accepted your past, accepted what remains and all that, I think that an opportunity opens up to let go.
Yeah.
Which is like forgetting. It is like forgetting. You're not remembering it. You're not re-bringing it to mind over and over again.
You bring up it's just interesting, something coming to mind right now, because I understand that. I understand that difficulty too. Like, why would I throw this away? It's the only basis for which I have to contextualize what happened to me.
Or what if it just won't go? It just
Yes.
re-pops up.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, because those energies are cyclical if they're not dealt with. They just keep showing up.
Right.
But what comes to mind when you say that is this. So recently, I went through this thing with my mother, right? We're on this journey together, my mom and I. And, there was this, how do I say this? we went on this family trip. We went to the movies, and my mother has this tendency, and her tendency is to sacrifice herself. And it's almost like a noble thing, but really it's coming from this inability to really, and I love my mother, it's just, and forgive me, mom, for putting your stuff on blast here, but she'll understand. But she'll want to lay on the sword rather than actually face the discomfort of speaking up for herself, right? She'll just be the martyr. And for so many years, I noticed that about her, right? And there's this hidden resentment, this anger that would show up every time she would do that, and I would immediately go, like, I'd put my heels in the mud and I'd be like, no, mom, you need to speak up for yourself, even though I knew what was needed to make things okay for her in that moment. There was this rejection, feeling this resentment, feeling like you're always putting me in a position to have to take care of you like I'm your parent, right? That was like where this resentment was coming from. And what I realized is that was me abdicating the responsibility of my own well being onto her. Like I was
Mm.
saying, okay, she needs to take care of this issue
Mm-hmm.
for me to be okay, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm so angry about this. And and what occurred to me, it was so peculiar because we went through this process, and then in the moment when that happened, something occurred to me for the first time in a long time. I was like, no, 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 I'm just gonna do this. Like it was a seat issue, like where people were sitting. I know it seems like a small deal, but obviously it was like years of things happening that just built up to this moment. And I just moved the seats to the that made sense. And it accounted for her and her needs too. And I realized, dude, like I'm a man. This is my community. This is the people I'm responsible for in my tribe. And I've been isolating her to deal with her own problem in her own world and not just taking care of the problem myself. So what I mean by that is this idea of forgiveness. It's like the entire thing was reframed. It wasn't like it went away, it just changed into something else. It was forgiven in a sense, meaning I let go of the stick in the mud or this heel digging tendency I had. And then new room was made for me to see what the actual solution was. And it didn't throw it away, it just made sense of it more. It was like,
and
oh
and
shit.
it's probably your good pleasure to be able to have the strength and ability to just do that. You're like, what have I been doing?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, it was like I
it's
was
you,
behaving like a child, I was like behaving like a 5-year-old self rather than like a grown man,
yeah, I'll just do it.
Yeah,
I'll
there's
just
this.
do the damn thing. Who doesn't want to be able to be useful? Like,
Yeah, and
it's
and she
true.
threw up a fit. She's like, "No, no, no, don't do that. Don't do that." Like don't move or do anything to I'll be the martyr, right? Like you don't have to trouble yourself. And it's like, "No." At that point I was like, "No, mom, this isn't for you anymore."
Right, right.
It is. It is,
Yeah,
but not because it's just it was a total reframe. Like
yeah.
holy shit, like what am I doing? Like I don't need to isolate her to her own problems anymore. And that's what I'm getting back to is this idea of community, right? Like all of these instincts we have, all this suppression and these difficulty, it's all geared like the seven instincts that we talk about sometimes on my channel, which I'm making more videos on it. I have a small channel. We're just getting real started here, but the seven basic instincts are fear, lust, rage, care, seeking or play, seeking, and then grief or panic and despair. The top one is panic and despair. And each of those have a role to play in keeping this tribe together, right? And we talk about, like, for instance, rage. Rage is it's often demonized in spiritual circles, right? It's this idea that, oh, you're not spiritual if you're angry. And the argument here that I'm making is that actually angry is a very important protective energy that we need to be able to embody. Like the truly integrated self doesn't resist anger. When it shows up, it knows exactly what to do and it does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah,
You have some
what did you think it was there for? Like,
Yeah,
not you. I mean,
exactly.
like
Exactly.
I'm gonna cut this arm off. It shouldn't be there. What are you
Exactly.
doing? It's
Yeah.
there
Exactly.
for a reason.
But the problem is that because it gets buried and mixed up with all these other issues we have, the rage is showing up at the wrong time. Like people come
Mm-hmm.
home angry at work and they didn't speak their mind, they didn't assert their boundary and speak up for themselves, so they go home and then beat up their dog.
Oh yeah,
But
Right.
it's
or
very
addicted to anger,
inappropriate.
even.
And so what happens is the spiritual community, they demonize these things. They say, oh, that's wrong. And then they further bury it. And so it goes more into the shadow and it's more blinding. And then it's causing more harm. And so it really is a matter of like making peace with what is as it shows up and arises, and like not being too attached to any ideas. Like when I was going through that with my mom, I was like, hey, mom, just so you know, like when we're talking about it afterward, I was like, just so you know, this is what was happening for me, but I'm not attached to it. Like I'm willing to change my mind. Like you let me know, right? And so I tell her how I perceived the whole situation, and then it was beautiful. Like the interaction was beautiful
Mm-hmm.
because we're each honoring the sovereignty of each individual and ourselves, and giving ourselves room for our minds to change, which is goes back to the sacred forgetting thing, right? Like we have to be willing to have our minds molded.
Any of these gurus, like the popular gurus that are like really cultivated a personality of bliss doubtness, they can access rage if they had to. Like they
Exactly.
could start screaming and kicking and saying no if they had to.
Right.
But I do think that there's an aspect of this where if you understand the variety of feelings you have, which are all necessary, they're going to come into play at different points. Maybe you could get to a point where, you know, you say rage shows up and it's like, hey, is it my turn? You could be like, no, I don't need rage necessarily right now, or that you might be able to select among your emotions a little more consciously.
So can we choose these states? I'm reading a book right now called The Untethered Soul. It's kind of like
Yeah.
talking about a lot of these things flowing through you and you kind of
Right.
being the decider of these states and then committing to them, even though it can be brutally hard. Like if you chose it, it brings the example of happiness. Like you choose to be happy? Choose to be happy, but that is going to be a brutal path for you to maintain that happiness.
Well, what do you
Like-
mean by
Yeah.
happy, and who's the chooser?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
which one of yous is the chooser? The little child version of you that's like still in your psyche, that's like, hey man, I didn't get paid attention to enough, or the id, or some like Freudian, you know, like, or whatever it is, Freud or Jung, I can't remember which one came up with that super ego stuff. But I'm saying
Yeah.
not only which you is choosing that there's a premium on happiness, but what do you even mean by happiness? You know, like what do
I
you
totally
mean by
agree.
happiness?
And you ask a really difficult question there, James. Is the like who, you know, can you choose to be happy? I don't. You know, I feel like there are certain disciplines, right, that we just kind of like that we can choose, and it's that habit, the disciplines that really kind of dictate how we show up unconsciously. You know, because there's we just can't be like we can't be actively choosing. Like I feel like that would be suffering, like having to choose every moment what to do. I feel like this is where I get back into the instincts. The instincts,
Yeah.
once they're freed, once the blockages around these instincts are freed, they know exactly what to do appropriately at any moment. And as long as we're not in the way, it carries itself out harmoniously. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
can think of very extreme examples, right? And that's I feel like the real joy of life is like you get to experience fear fully when it shows up. Say, you know, say a tiger shows up and you get afraid fully and it does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is like run or fight or something like that. Obviously, it's probably a bad scenario because you're gonna get fucked up by the tiger, but
Sorry,
Sorry.
You go
I
ahead.
just said it sounds like tuning a guitar, right? But it's your body. You have to learn how to tune it right.
I think there's too
And
much
so
pageantry.
why are so I think we've talked a little bit about why we're so out of tune, and I guess maybe a little bit how to tune it. But I'd like to know a little bit more about some of those things to properly, like, it'd be nice to be able to recognize all this stuff and let it flow naturally, let it know what it's doing at all time. But I'm honest, man, I still fly off the rocker every now and then. I have my bad moments. I'm like, man, I didn't handle that right.
yeah, I mean that it's tough. I mean, because the problem with this is that it's so individual, right? Each person's going to have their own makeup, their own side of the coin with each of these
Yeah.
things that they're resting on. Like because we've been talking about rage. I'm going through this. I'm presenting this thing on rage in a local place here recently, so that's why I'm particularly talking about this. But mind you, that these energies are all intimately interconnected, and it's all a part of your you know subtle emotional body or instinctual consciousness, what you could call. And So, when we talk about like rage or something, like typically, we're falling on one side of the coin or other when we have some sort of disruption. Either we like it's so suppressed that it shows up blindly and hurts people, or we're completely flaccid and can't do anything about any boundary setting at all. It's like we're totally incapable of it.
Mm.
And so, and like in the latter, when we're like incapable, sometimes those things, those energies will show up in the form of like a disease, sometimes like, like this like autoimmune stuff. And mind you, I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to prescribe anything here. And also, it's really important that anybody listening doesn't go try to pathologize themselves, because just discussing the problem implies that there's something you need to do about your problem. And then you got a whole nother problem on your hands. And that's why I say that really the answer is like interacting authentically in community and moving through those difficult energies together, being willing to do that. And there's this thing that happens when you make room for that in your mind. The universe responds. It shows up and gives you and delivers to you exactly what you need to actually start slowly unbinding these things. And that's really the process.
It's
And
weird that we demonize certain things in culture. Like there's this idea of, are you the guy that leaves a party and goes and thinks about what you said all, you know what I mean, for hours or something like that? And that kind of gets like demonized
mhm,
or categorized as an ADD thing or something like that. I don't
yeah,
know which category it falls into, but it's like, you know, there could be an importance on processing your interactions in a group. Like if you're going to go out and do the brave thing of not hiding in a cave, but like go and face the world, and you're confused by that, why demonize somebody for going and then like processing that, like also taking time? I'm not suggesting that you're demonizing that. I'm saying that
no, no,
sometimes it's like, hey, there's something wrong if you go and think about everything that just happened. Instead, like eat a pill or distract yourself. It's like,
sure.
but
And I don't think that's necessarily wrong either. But I do
yeah.
think that sometimes, like say, like for example, the way that used to show up for me is sometimes I would go to a party, right? And somebody may like say something that disrespects me or something, or like anything. Like it just could be so subtle, right? Or like I missed an opportunity, right? Like say, like lust, the instinct of lust or sexual energy. It's like the desire to merge, right? So like I'd go to a party and I'm single and there's a beautiful woman there and I didn't make an effort to maybe like, all of those things are these missed opportunities. And then what we do, because that instinct was alive at the time, we suppressed it. And then we go home and we think about it forever and ever and ever. It's like that dissociative mechanism is now responding to the suppressed
Mm.
energy that we didn't express.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is just as much of an issue. Not to say that, because I go inside, I'll go to inward, and I'll process things for sure. Like it's a big part of my process. But like I said, it's a balance, right? We have to engage, and then we have to go inside. Like we have to engage.
I was thinking a bit about the community thing. Not a lot. I think there's a lot of people out there that they don't have the safety or the place to even talk about the things that we're talking about here.
Right.
Uh, what would be your recommendation for someone who stumbles across a video like this and they're trying to figure out, where to go, the right type of people? What am I looking for so I can express myself where I can actually be authentic? Because a lot of people, I'm sure, they feel trapped.
Yeah, yeah, and that is really what those are the kinds of people I'm trying to reach with my content. Those are the types of people we're trying to invite in if they're willing to kind of, face this stuff. We offer an opportunity, right? We have a men's group. We meet online every Monday night on Zoom so people can join. Um, and then we have a local community too that we started. But if for most people, there's this idea that it's impossible, right? That there's this like that they're you know that they're uniquely disadvantaged, right? And that was my reality too. And what I'll say is first things first, if there's a real severe issue at hand, like, say you're dealing with a really strong addiction or something like that, immediately there's communities for rehab, right? So that's the first step. And it's a lifelong process. So you never, I don't know. I wouldn't say you never arrive, but you just got to start somewhere. Usually the pieces, the puzzle pieces are all laid out in front of you already. There's usually someone like if, for example, like I'll just offer an idea, and it's that you look at the people you resent the most, they're usually holding something for you. The resentment is usually hiding something. It's a wall we put up so that we don't have to deal with what the energy behind it. And this is usually a symptom of, like I said, a poorly developed dominant ego personality that's incapable of manning the waves. It's not a big enough boat. We haven't built enough boats. So the manual labor of building a boat is facing all of the things that are uncomfortable for you. The beautiful thing about it is that what we're really usually honestly surprised by is that when we move in that direction, we're surprised at the result. It's usually not what we imagined. It like there's a miracle that occurs. It sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's just ugly, but like at least you're doing something. At least you're moving. The question is, because this is only ever going to reach those who are just at the point where like something must change. There must be another way. And so those are the people that I'm speaking to, right? Because there's this, what do they say? It's like, it's almost better if things got worse because that would motivate you to change. But there's a whole huge amount of people out there, a populace that is just barely good enough to just kind of continue going the way they're going. Those are the ones that are the most, I think, doomed because because they're just comfortable enough. So I'm hoping that this too can inspire even some of those to really examine, like, you know,
Risky. Let's talk
it's
about a
it's
risky life we live, you know? Because
yeah,
that's so true what you said. Like, really, you got to face some kind of extreme suffering sometimes for this shift to be made, or like
you
honestly,
get to.
often, usually, maybe always, and but that suffering that you face, it could go either way, man. Like it's not a guarantee that you'll find the type of work that you're talking to. Sometimes it's like puts you over the edge, you know. Sometimes people get committed, and
I agree, and
we're all concerned for each other. We're trying to keep each other from doing that. We're like trying to keep each other comfortable enough away from that edge, even though that edge is often the thing that causes like some breakthrough that like frees you.
yeah, yeah, and you're so right because it is a risky thing even to recommend because I am one of those guys. Like in my 20s, when I was going through that crazy awakening, I was trying to share that with the world and my family. And in the state I was in at that time, my whole family's come around to me now, right? Like it's been many, many years since then. They all actually really admire me and look up to me. But at that time, when I was trying to share my revelations, I was then diagnosed with severe bipolar and schizophrenia. I mean, I was committed. I was like literally committed to a place, right? They thought I was crazy. And that is a risk. And yeah, I say that at the risk of alienating the whole audience. Like, oh no, this guy's just crazy. We shouldn't listen to a word he says. And you're right. You should do what makes sense for you. However, there's always going to be this part of me that wants to demand the best of people. And I feel intuitively like there's just so much potential that is yet to be tapped into. And so I'm just nudging, like I want, I'm often sometimes seen as the, the catalyst or sometimes the enemy at times in my men's group because and it's a thing I have to learn. Like sometimes I'd be a little pushy and it's something that comes from my own wounding because of my desire to be heard and understood because was raised in a place where I wasn't, so like I felt like I was a ghost. So I'm learning to turn this trauma into a gift. And that's really the thing is like, we're not looking to fix ourselves. We're looking to just integrate everything into um, a real person, right? With all of that intact. Like it doesn't just go away. We're not trying to get rid of our past. We're not trying to like fix ourselves. It's such a pathology that we've done. I mean, we go to the therapist and they have a whole manual. They can find you on every page of that manual. We have all these identities and things that we live with, like, well, I'm ADD, and all of that. I was diagnosed with all of that stuff. So I
Yeah.
get it, but the whole society, it's really bent. It really doesn't
Hmm.
work. And
It's
and I
always just people looking at something they don't understand and boxing it into something. You know what I
Always
mean?
trying to label
totally,
something.
Yeah.
totally, and it breaks my heart. And that's really where this passion comes from for me. That's really why I want to make this channel. And it, I just that's why I'm doing what I'm doing because I really do feel, at the end of the day, been what I've been through. At the end of the day, when we're integrating our spiritual lessons, everything's just calling us to service at the end of the day, like what you guys are doing, right? You're bringing this stuff to people, and it's an act of service. And I think that we're all called to that. And it's not becoming the perfect person. It's looking at the reality of your, hardships and turning that into service.
You ever heard that story where the guy comes up and he's angry at the Buddha? The Buddha's teaching in town. You may have heard this. And this guy comes up and he doesn't like the Buddha for some reason, so he spits in the Buddha's face. And the Buddha just smiles at him. And the guy goes home and he's like, what the? He just smiled at me, and he goes back the next day to like apologize and beg for the forgiveness of the Buddha. And the Buddha's like, I don't forgive you because you didn't do anything wrong. That's not the person that stands before me today. And some days we come on here and we're on. And some days I'm going to come here and I'm going to be less Buddha-like. And there's going to be a different man sitting here that's been integrating demons. You know what I mean? I think that freedom's good too. I resonate with a lot of stuff you said, man. It's a delight to hear somebody like you talk and interact with you, because it is sort of esoteric. It doesn't go along with our capitalistic society trying to sell something. Yeah. It's to get the raw honesty. I value it. And anybody, if I'm talking to my dad and I see him get vulnerable and honest, I happen to really like that.
Me too. But it's refreshing, right? It's like, holy shit, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And I battle
endorphin rush.
Right. Like I battle with that too. Like, cause like coming onto the channel, like making videos, sometimes I'll put a lot of effort into writing the perfect script, and I got a prompter here and all that stuff. And I try to make it, as succinct, and because we're so used to seeing perfect content. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to compete. Right. But I'm feeling called to do more of this kind of stuff, right? Which is just off the cuff. Like, I think people really find that refreshing, and I don't want
so good.
Yeah.
It feels so good to be that way. It's like the artist's curse or something. Like, well, I could make art that I love and speaks to my soul, or I could like go Xerox some shit that I know is going to work. Like, that is a struggle because we all got to survive,
Let's make a shift, because some of your content, you talk a little bit about kind of like the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and we live in this day and age where it's like there's this hyper examination of genders and gender roles and how it all plays together. Do you ever worry, like, am I offending someone, or does it matter, or like, how do you ride this line of talking about this stuff, and where do you sit on it?
Yeah, such a good question, man. I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, and what I can tell you is that for so long, as a man, I was stuck underneath what I would call the feminine bubble. It's if you look at like especially as a man, like a boy coming into the world, our first real love is our mothers. Right, we come into it, we fall in love with our mothers. It's this very precious, sacred thing, and they put this bubble of feminine protection around us. And the power of this feminine energy, what I'm learning, and this has nothing to do with genders at all, but I'll get into that too, because I do have an opinion. But there's what every boy has to do is they're raised through boyhood. Like a mother will raise a baby into a boy, and then there's this step that takes place beyond that, which I didn't get, which is boy to man. And it's an initiation, and it's an initiatory process. It's like the initiation into manhood. For so long I was dating so many women, and I was creating the relationship that I thought made sense, and it wreaked havoc on my nervous system, which is this feeling of belonging to a feminine protector bubble, like a boy, right? Like I was existing in this relationship with women that I inevitably turned into mothers, and there's the nurturing part of them that would play along, but the attraction would fade. And I wasn't fulfilling my masculine role, which I would call, these are, when we talk about polarity, these are fundamental to reality, these polarities of energies. Now, I have a lesbian sister, and she's in a relationship with someone that I would call more masculine, right? She's more of the feminine archetype, and and her wife is more of the masculine archetype. But so those polarities just are they're yin and yang. They're rotating around one another. They create tension and attraction, and there's a pushing and a pulling, and this is magic that arises. And so I had to
Who
learn.
doesn't like lesbians?
Exactly.
It's magic.
So 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 for me, like learning how to, being initiated into my manhood was like a huge part of my journey, and learning what that really meant, how to create safety, how to create a strong container for my now wife to really flourish in. And that challenge was really put to the test for us, because when we got married, my wife was immediately diagnosed with severe kidney disease, and then I had to be the provider for her while she's been in recovery from that. And so all of that had a role to play. It was just this part of it. It was, I was ready for that. And so, what we see happening, I feel like, is there's a lot of boys just not being initiated. There's not a culture and a thing that we have to look up to. So I think that there's a lot of confusion going on. And I think, for me in particular, obviously there's been many years where we were very patriarchal, right? And now there's huge movements today that are speaking out saying that it's still that way. But culturally, I think it's actually the opposite. I think that we have become very feminized, meaning feelings over logic or clarity. And we did this correction, and now it's become very, like everybody gets a blue ribbon trophy. Like everybody needs to be acknowledged, and we need to put the care of everyone above everything else, when in fact, the man sometimes needs to step in and go, this is where we have to draw the line, which inevitably creates uncomfortable delineations between things. Like we have to set boundaries. The man has to bring this clarity in. And so there's what I find is that it really will work out well when we become like when more boys are initiated into healthy masculinity, manhood. And what I'm talking about isn't toxic masculinity. Like that's another term that's often thrown out there, right? I don't think toxic masculinity is masculinity. It's boyhood. It's a version of boyhood where they don't have control, and uh, they don't have what you would call um, they haven't integrated their emotional nature within their awareness. They have so much existing in the shadows, and so they're very volatile. And that's the nature. That's the danger of being an uninitiated man, is being a grown man in a boy's psyche. And I find that that's happening often. And in some cases, it's happening so much to where people are rejecting masculinity altogether. And in some cases, like, when we talk about all this weird, gender stuff, I think that's an expression of that. It's a denial of one of the aspects of the whole, which is masculine feminine balance, this beauty that happens between them. And so my wife and I have really been pursuing that and exploring that together through this alchemical process of relating to one another. And I think that for a man to really start to understand, like, it really, I'm not here to make enemies. I just, when I see like, a trans woman or something like this, a man and becoming a woman, there's this presumption that they understand what femininity is. And I think that the only way to truly understand femininity through a man's body is by relating properly to a woman. It's like they're the window into an aspect of ourselves that's unconscious, because we all have these two energies within us. And gets into Jungian psychology, right? Like the anima or the animus. And I don't know how far down that rabbit hole you want to go down, but
Yeah. Well, some are more than the others. I sometimes feel like the bold nature of like the LGBT community is simply saying that just because I'm this gender, don't tell me that I have to be this role or I have to fit this role. And maybe sometimes, I think we've talked about it, maybe you have something to say on this, is the idea of like labeling every action, everything taken as that's masculine, that's feminine. Like how do we pick which ones are masculine and feminine? I think this causes the problem, is that we want to put everyone into like a box, and then then you should be more like this and you should be more like this if you fall into that, what we deem as that role you should play.
Well, I think you point out a huge mistake. I don't think we need to put anybody in boxes, right? Like
No.
each person is an individual and we should celebrate that individuality. But I think that this need to, like, if someone says, "Oh, I'm this. You need to call me this." It's like my response is, "But you're so much more than that. Like, why are we reducing you to this one label? Like, you're way beyond that. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we trying to?" But the truth is that there's also these polarities, like these, and that's why I think for many years, ancient tradition and even language, like, uh, gendered language was a thing because everything just has a polarity to it, and it's just kind of the nature of things. But we don't have to insist that it's a label or that it means something about us. It doesn't. It really, it's like it's a small part of a bigger whole, and especially when it comes to the individual, there are aspects of me that are absolutely feminine. I wouldn't be able to relate properly to my wife if I didn't have a feminine part of my being, right?
Hmm.
And for me to go out and try and just get upset that that's a thing and that people are saying that about me, like, I don't know. I think that that's also an expression of this kind of weakness that we have where we can't really even handle anybody's mistakes. If somebody's calling us something and it's not true, okay, then it shouldn't, it's like, that's
Well,
fine.
that's a
Like,
good litmus test. I always say, if somebody comes up and calls you a flower, you'd be like, what?
Right.
What does that even mean? You know what I mean? Or calls you like something, just, you're a wall. You'd be like, okay, there's just water off a duck's back. But if they say something that your psyche is sensitive about, all of a sudden you could get defensive or hostile.
Right.
So if it cuts close and the pointing out of it requires you to change in some way.
Well, it does give you, like, it gives you a clue into what may be happening within you.
Right.
Right. And that I think is the value in that. And so when I interact with people like that, forgive me, when I interact with people like that, the challenge I'm always bringing and what makes me a catalyst and sometimes an enemy of these people is that when I see that reaction, I'm always like, well, let's lean into that. And they don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Most
No,
people
I get
don't,
that. Yeah.
yeah, they don't
Like,
want
but
to.
that's where the gold is. That's
That
where
is.
if we get through, you'll be free.
Exactly.
I did want to weigh in on the LGBTQ thing, because I was kind of quiet during that whole thing. I was listening to what you guys were saying there. And just a smattering of things came to mind, like I was watching Jerry Springer back in the day, and there was a transsexual woman on there, or man, or whatever, and it got violent, and they went from feminine and dainty really quick to like, hey man, get out of here. And as a little kid, we were immature, and we probably harshly judged all kinds of things, but in that moment we were like, oh, we're all of a sudden on the side of the person that rose to the situation. And there are women who even, no matter how elegant or whatever it is, when it calls for it, they can conjure strength. And to me personally, I seem to, it sounds sort of sleazy earlier when I said, who doesn't like lesbians? There's people out there that have got a history and maybe they don't like them. What I'm saying is, I maybe selfishly, because people struggle with their walks in identity. It's hard for them, but I enjoy the variety of people experimenting with gender. I also think it's important for Jordan Peterson to sit down with somebody that tried to switch back and they go over all the gritty details of what that was really like. It's like, these people, there's been times in history where people for religious reasons were like castrating themselves. Like it was like trending to castrate themselves. Humans do all kinds of stuff. And if people are exploring gender identity, I kind of am a supporter of it. I don't know that anything will last. We might collectively be revealed things, but at the end of the day, whatever's going on in the communities out there, it's like, if it is like it's happening. And I don't think things happen without like reasons. There's reasons that led to it. I happen to, is just to put a cherry on it, appreciate anybody that tries to cultivate balance. You know what I mean? Like to me, I don't believe in toxic masculinity or toxic femininity or whatever. But if somebody becomes a two-dimensional character and it's apparent to those that can see that they're like living lopsided, like you have feminine capacity within you, have nurturing capacity in you, but you're subduing it to projected, like some kind of cartoonishly machismo thing, And then there's people that I can't judge them. They might just literally be like they had two dads and grew out of the ground, you know what I mean? And they're just hyper masculine. I don't want to be
Yeah.
too judgy, you know what I mean?
Me neither.
Um,
And I agree with that. But I do have some strong opinions on this stuff. Like,
mhm.
I'll say something. This is it's a bit controversial. I've gotten into trouble with this in my men's group, but when I analyze, like, what should we as a culture be celebrating most? And I think it's heterosexual relationships. I don't demonize homosexual relationships. It doesn't bother me at all. But I just feel that there is a difference, and the difference is that these are uniquely, heterosexual relationships are unique in that they create life, and that we should all be able to hold hands across America and say that that's a beautiful thing, right? Together, gay,
Of course,
straight,
that's
whatever.
a
Like we should all just
yeah.
celebrate this, like it's beautiful, and I think that that's sometimes overlooked, and I don't. I think that that should be just absolutely honored for what it is.
Of course,
Yeah.
the capacity of two people that are, sensible, salt of the earth people that bring life into the world. That is great, sure. But I think that what gets overlooked sometimes when somebody gets into the realm of like demonizing homosexuality or something like that is like the not talked about aspect where it's like, well, is this a threat or not? Like people behave sometimes towards like when they start conjuring hate or criticism or vitriol towards a person's like sexual identity. It's like, well, let's get real about whether or not it's a threat. Like, if that's true, does it infringe on some kind of traditional value? Does it, by its own existence, negate something you're doing, or is it have a tendency to spread? Is there a spreading effect to this? Is it taking away from conservative values and actually bolstering more liberal things? Is that connected to it? And I think that that's like would be a prudent conversation to have, like
Agree.
mature conversation to have about like, well, if it's not a threat, then what's the problem? If it is a threat, meaning the spread of it or the overemphasis on something, people shoot for the moon, we got to fix this, and now something's everywhere. And I'm not saying anything's anything in case anybody's starting to get like heated here. I'm
Yeah.
saying be aware whether or not something's a threat or not, because I guarantee you I've felt like saying this, and I bet you there's people that want to just say, listen, I am a threat to you. I was pushed around my whole life by this type of shit, and you goddamn right I'm a threat. I'm a threat, and it's probably going to highlight how dysfunctional your supposedly proper thing is if I can make this happen. Now I don't know, I'm not in a relationship with a dude, but I'm
Right.
saying uh, but if you started to regard same-sex relationships and they seem to be happy in it, and you concluded that that was like a threat to you, maybe that's where some of this is coming from. You know what I mean? I don't
Sure.
know.
I
I
th-
don't
I
know.
I think you bring up a really good point, and I'm happy to go into all these topics because I love discussing this. It's like common stuff, in my community in my circles. We talk about all this. We try to welcome all these conversations, but I do think you're right. I mean, I think that there's like intuitively when I think about like the LGBT influence, it's highly celebrated, right? It's kind of front and center in most of our culture. And there could be an argument to be made that there are certain populations that are susceptible to the influence, right? Especially females. Um, it just seems that
I've heard that. Yeah.
their sexuality is a little like, I even asked my wife. My wife finds women attractive, right? We generally we don't really pursue anything like that, but I
We
just
can
know
share everything.
I just know that for a female, like, if she goes down that road once, it's not really a big deal. It doesn't mean anything. It's not the same for dudes, right? It's just not the same. So I do think that there is conversation to be had around that. Um, and yeah, I could see there are people in my life too, like examples of homosexual relationships where I'm like, they're just it's working for them, and I'm like, cool, that's it's not my I don't care. Like I said, it's like freedom, but in the meantime, I'm also gonna lean into what I feel makes sense and celebrate this formation, which seems
Mhm.
to be for me, um, like in because I was raised in the society where I had a lot of that influence, and I was very friendly with the gay community for a while. I dated a girl whose like best friend was gay, and I was like had a gay roommate at once. It was just all this stuff. So I had a lot of this influence, And I was always very, it seemed what happened to me at that time was that um it's a very open community, and it's almost like I think if I were to really reach compassionately into that community, especially in the gay men's community, there's so much there's a lot of issues within that community too that aren't being addressed, and it's hidden behind this, like, well, we need to celebrate this and not criticize it at all. But there's a lot of sexual addiction, a lot of like dissociation, a lot of like trouble. And although society may be partly to blame, I don't think we have to treat each individual, and I think a lot of trauma is happening. And my heart goes out to them, and it's a conversation that's not being had, like that's not being talked about. And so, I'm making a community where we can lean into our authenticity. But some of these people will claim to know what they are, but if you challenge it, then they get very upset. And
Hmm.
that to me is indicative of something, and I don't know exactly what it is. And I want to go into
Yeah.
that. Like, let's
Yeah.
explore that. Like, what is so uncomfortable? What's this resistance coming from? And why are you so insistent on demanding me to believe and accept what you're saying when I can feel
Yeah.
this energy, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
feel something's
Mm-hmm.
up. And that's
Mm-hmm.
more of that gaslighting, the same cultural gaslighting that we're being fed all the time, which is this: don't say this, anything but this, anything that matters, right? It's like, and that's so sad to me. Like, we have to have a conversation. Like you said, I don't know ultimately, but um, I have a feeling, I have an intuition. It's pulling me in certain directions. So
Well said. I liked how we touched. I'm glad we talked about that. Um, the time's going quick. I want
yeah.
to jump into another. I don't want to miss anything. So,
Okay.
uh, one of the things I like to do is kind of talk about some of the mystical stuff, because we're talking sometimes about spirituality here, consciousness. You talked a little bit about kind of like your experience there and your awakening experience. But I always like to kind of like get an overarching perspective from our guests
Mm.
on, after all their study, everything that they've been through. Do you have any epiphanies or, strong feelings about what's actually really going on with reality? What is reality? It's a big one.
What a question. Jesus. You guys ever read The Law of One
I've
material?
heard a lot of Aaron Abkey stuff on it,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Yeah, me too. Um, I really like that model,
me
the
too.
metaphysical model. I feel like it really is making sense. Um, from from what I'm learning, like I just, I have such a limited perspective, um, and have my experiences, but just this experience here on Earth is this experience where it would seem, based on my awakening thing that happened to me, that we come here and by choice, and we are eternal, right? If we're like made in the image of God, we must be eternal. I do believe that, truly, fundamentally. Like, I really have invited that in. My body still fears death in some ways, right? Like, I still have all the instincts that keep me alive here. Um, but I think that we come here and we choose to come here for some purpose, and that usually it's some form of expansion. Um, and so we go through a veil of forgetting. We come here to have an authentic experience. We map it out. We choose to come here, uh, and it's a matter of really um, integrating and engaging with what is in this experience, because it's all for a purpose. And and it's just how much how much can we allow, right? Like, how much can we allow and integrate is really the whole purpose here. And I do feel that
Hmm.
that, like, they say that we're a drop in the ocean, but also the ocean in a drop, that there's this fractal nature to the universe, that um within every being is the whole expression of God, but also that there are just a part as well, right? These great truths, these paradoxes. And so, you know, it's such an opportunity, this experience here. It's like all pro bono, like you said, it's all bonus. And even the difficulty it's all bonus. We get to do all of this and it's all bonus. And I think that at the end of the day, when we die, we just wake up. We just go home. Now, I don't want to influence anybody to do that early. it's not it's not an escape. I don't think that there's any real escape from life. Like there's only this. There's only
Because you're
pressure.
just going to come back anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you flunked, so you got to go back, repeat the grade, right? I do believe that.
I don't think anybody dies.
Right.
Like what I mean by that is like I've already died a bunch of deaths.
Right, right.
You know, when we started this show, you can go back and watch, like, I correctly crowned myself Lord Cringe because I've said so many unbelievable, I probably still do, but what I mean is like mindlessly stupid, cringy things that are cataloged forever. And
I love it.
maturity happens.
Me too.
And I think about like a childhood, I'm like, we never had a funeral for all the versions of me that died. Your name was Jamie when we were growing up. His name is James now. We never said goodbye to Jamie. And your character has changed. And so I think that the only thing that could cause like a fear of death is like getting confused about the mask, you know, thinking that this mask is it like there's something that is aware whether you're conscious even or not. There's something that is static and there. But we're addicted to stories. We tell story after story after story, you know what I mean? And if we can just take a break from the stories, I think we get in touch with something more eternal, something that's eternal.
Yeah. I agree there. You said something just a moment ago that escapes my mind now. There was something that you said that made me think of something. Gone.
Remember
gone.
Ultron? Ultron keeps reinventing himself. You know, there's like so many previous versions of Ultron.
I don't know Ultron. Who's Ultron?
He's a bad guy from one of the Marvel movies.
Marvels.
He's like a robot that
terrible.
keeps like recreating himself into a bigger, better version of himself. But like, I think sometimes when you hear people talk about like, you know, don't worry about death because there's no you to die. You're not going to die because the you that we often take as ourselves, I think, is just it's like a thought cluster. It's like something that feels solid,
Right.
like an ego. You know what I mean? And
I
if
think.
you
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead, take over.
So I think like what's so cool about this experience is that if we were to go to fundamental reality, right, like this primordial existence, like eternal oneness in all directions and love beyond words, right? Just that's the fundamental basis for all. And then we get to have this experience, which is literally impossible from that perspective, which is this idea that we could be separate, that we could be ephemeral, meaning we're going to die someday. And it's this whole like opposite of like what is, and we get to experience that. And it's like this, like if I were God, right? If I were God and I was eternal and could do anything, and it was just eternal oneness, unchanging, ever expanding love in all directions. Like, and then I could say to myself, like, well, you know, what would be cool to do, right? Like this would probably be it. Like I'd be like, okay, well, let me see if I can go in and forget that this is the nature of reality and then have this experience where it would be possible and limits were possible and all these things, right? It's like this is that. I feel like this is that. We get to have that.
It's like a ridiculous miracle.
Yeah, totally.
If you can let go for a sec, you know. The weird thing is, I think you can feel physical pain in this life. But if you're not attached to it, it takes on a different nature. It's like can be almost fascinating at times. And I don't want to diminish pain or take that lightly. It can be very hard to shift your focus when you're in chronic pain. But I mean, like, I think sometimes when people get mired in like where the final conclusion, and I'm not judging, man. Like I know this realm, okay, of like well, it's be better for me to just end it then. It's like, just let go of your story. Just let go of it. You don't, obviously, something's gone wrong along the way, because you can't even, there is a lot to be grateful for with just breathing. And it's maybe not conceptual, it's maybe not logical, but if you let go for a moment, you will understand what I mean. And don't overlook what's there when you let go. Don't be like, okay, I let go. Moving on. It's like, who's moving on? Just wait a sec.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just don't grab back on for a sec. I think that's like, I think it's honestly why we sleep. You know what I mean? Like, for those that can't do it with their mind, it's like, well, then go to bed. Go to sleep for a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The juice is always worth this. The juice is always worth the squeeze when you drink the juice. There's always a squeeze, though, right? There is so much value in that. Like exactly what you're saying. That's beautifully said. I agree with you completely.
Wicked. Good.
Well,
Awesome.
Tyler, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We talked about a lot of stuff here, really good stuff. Maybe to close things out, maybe if you have some last words that you want to share with your audience about the counter complex, about yourself, whatever you want, and then maybe let our audience know where they can find you, what you got going on, and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on, you guys. This has been great. I had a great time. I feel like you did too, and this was really exciting. Hope to, maybe extend our relationship into the future somehow. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so for me, man, everything the counter complex, you can look up the counter complex. I'm on Instagram and all that. I have a limited bandwidth, so I'm doing as much as I can. I have got a studio here behind me. We working hard on creating as much of the content as we can around what we've been sharing today. And so I'm always feels a little bit behind schedule, but I'm trying. But yes, if you would like, anybody that's listening, we do have a men's group that, it's Pacific Standard Time, 6:30 p.m. every Monday. It's open. There's a small fee. It just pays for the network and all that. We're not trying to make money. But it's a really beautiful experience, a really beautiful opportunity for anybody that's just, on the edge and they just want to try something new. They can come join us. So, you can go to thecountercomplex.com. There's links there that'll take you to the network. We have like a Mighty Network online community space that we do this on. And and just, if you could subscribe to the channel, we'll keep more information coming. The Counter Complex at YouTube, just search up the Counter Complex. It's a perfect name because no one else has named that. So it worked out. There's no confusion. But yeah, like this world is beautiful. And when we talk about really engaging with it, it's a matter of service, and just showing up is an act of service. Just doing something like, what I feel like we forget is that being yourself is an act of service. Really, really leaning into it, like facing the discomfort. If you have resentments, discussing the resentments, that's engaging with maybe where you're at. And I don't know who I'm speaking to. I don't know who's listening. I'm trying to reach in all the way to the bottom, where I was, which was, just totally alone and totally, just a walking ball of just intense suppressed energy, right? And we just have to open a door. And what I'll say is that it really helps to make connection to something greater. And I guarantee there is something out there, and I don't know what that is for you. It's a personal experience, but making room for a prayer of the heart every day is enough to get this ball started. And whether you end up in my community or not is no different to me, because what we're trying to do is create a movement, is to start something where this spark spreads all over the world, because that's the only thing we can do here. Is like, we're here, and while we're here, I'm gonna do something to beautify this place, and that's what we're trying to do. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me on, and yeah, man, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Bye, guys.